The grand chandelier sparkled over the ballroom, casting prismatic light on the polished marble floor. The crowd clinked glasses, murmuring politely, but all eyes were on the young girl standing nervously in a pale blue gown. Lila Monroe clutched the edge of the velvet chair, her pulse racing. She had been promised to Damien Blackwood, a man known for wealth, influence, and a mysterious past. The town whispered that he had everything: money, power, charm. But Lila had never met him. Damien approached, tall, immaculately dressed, and confident in a way that commanded the room. His smile was polished, but there was a glint in his dark eyes that unsettled her. "Lila," he said, voice smooth and commanding, "tonight our lives begin together. You will have wealth, influence, everything you could ever dream of." She looked up at him, heart pounding, and forced a polite smile. "And what if I have my own dreams?" Damien's smile flickered, a shadow crossing his face. "Dreams? My dear, dreams are secondary when opportunity knocks." Lila felt the weight of expectation press down on her. Her parents nodded, pride and relief evident in their expressions. They thought she would embrace the security, the status, the comfort. But Lila had other plans. As the room celebrated, she slipped her hand into her purse, fingers brushing against a small notebook she had hidden all week. It contained sketches, ideas, strategies, and a list of her ambitions. Ambitions far beyond wealth and the shadow of marriage. Tonight, Damien believed he held all the cards, but Lila knew something he didn't. She was clever, observant, and far more daring than anyone suspected. And as the orchestra played, a subtle determination settled in her chest. Wealth and power could be promised, but freedom and choice were hers to claim. The first evening of her new life had begun, and quietly in the shadows of grandeur, Lila's plans were taking shape. The carriage rattled over the cobblestone streets, the rain from the evening now a gentle drizzle. Lila pressed her gloved hands together, staring at the imposing silhouette of Blackwood Manor as it loomed ahead. The mansion was magnificent: stone towers, ivy-clad walls, and windows that gleamed with golden light. But its grandeur could not hide the icy chill that seeped into her bones. Damien walked beside her, his posture perfect, his every movement deliberate. His black suit clung to him like armor, his eyes scanning the grounds as though expecting invisible enemies. "This will be your home now," Damien said smoothly, voice low, almost hypnotic. "You'll have everything you could want: luxury, education, influence. But you must also learn control comes with sacrifice." Lila's pulse quickened. She had heard these promises at the ballroom, but now, seeing the mansion in all its intimidating glory, she realized the reality might be far different. The walls whispered secrets, and the air smelled of polished wood, candle wax, and something darker: power, ambition, perhaps even danger. As she stepped inside, the grandeur swallowed her. Marble floors stretched beneath her feet. Chandeliers dripped crystal light. Portraits of ancestors stared down, their eyes sharp, judging, demanding obedience. Lila felt a shiver. This house was more than a residence. It was a fortress of expectations, a prison disguised as paradise. Damien guided her through the halls, speaking in calm, instructive tones. "Your quarters are this way. Study the house. Understand it. Knowing where every entrance, exit, and secret passage lies can save a life. Your own." Lila's curiosity piqued. Secret passages, hidden doors. Something about Damien's casual warning hinted at a world she had never been allowed to explore, a dangerous world lurking beneath the veneer of wealth. When they arrived at her bedroom, a massive chamber adorned with silk curtains and antique furniture, Lila felt a strange thrill. This room was hers, but only in appearance. The walls felt like a cage. And yet, in her small suitcase, she had tucked her notebook, her pen, and her ideas. She was determined. Wealth could buy comfort, but it could never dictate her mind. Damien lingered at the doorway, his gaze sharp. "Remember, Lila, power can corrupt. Knowledge is what protects you. Never forget who controls the narrative." Lila's lips curled into a subtle, defiant smile. "I will control my own story." Hours passed. Lila explored her quarters in secret, mapping the room, noting the creaks of the floorboards, the locks on the windows, and even the peculiar arrangement of furniture that could conceal passageways. She discovered a small library tucked behind a sliding bookshelf, filled with books on strategy, history, and influence. Her pulse raced with excitement. This is where I begin, she thought. Not as a bride, not as a pawn, but as a mind preparing for the game. Later at dinner, the grandeur returned. The long mahogany table, crystal goblets, candles flickering, servants moving silently. Damien observed her keenly, every gesture, every hesitation. "You read carefully, don't you?" he asked, eyes glinting. Lila met his gaze steady. "I observe, I learn, I adapt." Damien's lips curved into a slow, almost predatory smile. "Good, you should, because in this house, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival. And survival can be far more dangerous than you imagine." After dinner, when the servants left and the house sank into silence, Lila sat in the library, notebook open. She began documenting everything: the layout of the house, Damien's behavior patterns, the slight hesitations in his voice, the glimmer in his eyes when he mentioned control. And then she paused. A thought struck her. What if this house, this wealth, this promised life was designed to shape her into something she didn't want to become? The storm outside mirrored her racing mind. Lightning illuminated the towering shelves. Rain tapped like a heartbeat on the windows. She felt a surge of clarity. If she was going to live her life on her own terms, she needed a plan, and she needed it now. Lila wasn't just going to survive in the House of Secrets. She was going to turn the house, the rules, and even Damien's promises into her own ladder. Step by step, she would climb, because wealth and power could be promised, but freedom and control would be earned. And tonight, in the shadows of opulence, Lila Monroe's real story quietly began. The first morning at Blackwood Manor dawned with a heavy mist curling around the towering stone walls. Lila rose early, before the servants stirred, her mind racing with calculations. The mansion, though beautiful, felt like a labyrinth designed to test her. Every hallway a challenge, every shadow a question. She dressed quickly, choosing a modest, slate-gray dress that allowed ease of movement. Beneath the silk and lace of her formal gowns, she now understood lay power and danger. Today, she would begin her first test, learning the rhythms of the house, the routines of Damien, and the secrets hiding in plain sight. Downstairs, Damien sipped coffee in the grand breakfast room, his posture impeccable, his gaze scanning the morning papers. He looked up as she entered. "You're early," he said smoothly, dark eyes assessing. "Most would sleep late in comfort, but I see you are not most." Lila's lips curved into a faint smile. "I like to observe before acting," she replied, calm, deliberate. Damien nodded, impressed, though he hid it behind his usual reserve. Observation is the first weapon. The second is action. Use both wisely. Breakfast was a study in patience for Lila. Servants moved silently, refilling cups, presenting trays with precise timing. Damien's assistant, a sharp-eyed man named Colton, moved near her, his watchful gaze flicking between them like a hawk. Lila noticed the smallest details, the direction of his eyes, the slight tension in his shoulders, the subtle signals exchanged with Damien. Each observation was a puzzle piece she could use. After breakfast, Damien led her on a tour of the estate's library and private study. Rows of ancient books, manuscripts, and ledgers filled the walls. He paused in front of a locked cabinet. "These," he said, voice low, "contain records of Blackwood enterprises, partnerships, and some sensitive dealings. One day you may need to understand them, but only after you've proven your judgment." Lila's curiosity sparked. Sensitive dealings. Could they be vulnerabilities? She filed the thought in her mind, already scheming ways to uncover the truth. As Damien left to attend to his own business, Lila slipped into the study. She carefully examined the lock, noting its mechanism, the subtle scratches near the keyhole, signs of frequent use. Knowledge is power. Observation is control. Her pulse quickened. Even in this room, she could turn her curiosity into advantage. Hours passed with Lila mapping routines. Which doors creaked, which servants hesitated near her, which shadows held secrets. Every detail added to the invisible chessboard she was now playing. By evening, she had discovered a hidden passage behind one of the bookshelves, a narrow spiral staircase descending into darkness. Her heart pounded. The mansion's secrets were real, tangible. Lila felt a thrill. This was her first real move, not against Damien directly, but against the house's unseen rules. That night, as rain lashed against the windows, Lila sat in her room, notebook open. She outlined her strategy: learn everything, anticipate everyone and never reveal her true intentions. Wealth and power were Damien's tools. Her mind would be hers. Lightning illuminated her determined face. The mansion seemed to hold its breath, aware of the storm brewing within its walls. Lila knew this was just the beginning. Every smile, every polite gesture, every lesson from Damien was a test, one she intended to pass on her own terms. And somewhere deep in her heart, a quiet, defiant voice whispered, "They may have promised wealth and power, but I will claim freedom and control." The first move had been made. The game had begun. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Blackwood Manor, painting golden streaks across the marble floors. Lila stood at the balcony, notebook in hand, eyes scanning the sprawling grounds below. The gardens were immaculate, almost unnervingly perfect, yet something about their precision made her uneasy. Every hedge, every fountain, every walkway seemed curated not for beauty but for control. Damien entered silently, as always, the echo of his footsteps measured, almost predatory. "You watch everything," he remarked, eyes narrowing slightly. "Even the smallest detail does not escape you. Good, but observation without action is wasted potential." Lila turned, meeting his gaze with calm defiance. "I observe to learn, not to be learned." A flicker of surprise passed over Damien's face, quickly masked by a smile. "Clever," he said, "but remember, cleverness alone doesn't grant freedom. Control does. Influence. Power. You'll see soon enough which is more dangerous." Breakfast was tense. Servants moved like shadows, careful not to meet Lila's gaze too long. Colton hovered nearby, clipboard in hand, pretending to take notes but clearly assessing her reactions. Lila made mental notes, the slight twitch in his hand when Damien spoke, the way he glanced at her, the rhythm of his breathing. Every detail, every nuance she stored away. Later, Damien summoned her to the study. The locked cabinet from yesterday stood before them, ominous and foreboding. "Today," Damien said, voice low, "you will witness a lesson in power. Not all power is earned by blood or wealth. Some is inherited, some is taken, and some is hidden." He withdrew a set of old keys, selecting one with deliberate precision. Lila's pulse quickened as he unlocked the cabinet. Inside were documents, letters, contracts, traces of alliances, betrayals, and manipulations spanning decades. "These records show the world behind the Blackwood name," Damien explained. "Every partnership, every secret deal, it's all calculated. Everything has a purpose, a pawn, and a player. One day, you may need to decide which side you are on." Lila skimmed through the pages, noting discrepancies, unusual clauses, and mentions of people she'd never met. Manipulation disguised as protection, alliances disguised as loyalty. Her mind raced. She realized Damien's world was intricate, and every promise he made, wealth, influence, safety, was a move in a larger game she barely understood. As she closed the cabinet, Damien's voice cut through her thoughts. "You're learning fast, but knowledge is dangerous if not wielded carefully. Do you understand that?" "I do," Lila said evenly, hiding the spark of defiance growing within her. "I understand more than you think." That night, Lila explored the hidden spiral staircase she discovered earlier. It wound down into a forgotten wing of the manor, dusty, cold, and untouched. She found old journals, maps, and blueprints, evidence that the mansion itself was designed as both sanctuary and trap. Secret exits, surveillance points, and rooms hidden from the casual eye. A plan began to form. Lila wasn't just learning Damien's rules, she was preparing to bend them. Every observation, every secret passage, every uncovered motive was another piece in her strategy. Before retiring, she wrote in her notebook, "Step 1, understand the player. Step 2, anticipate the moves. Step 3, never let them see my hand." And as lightning illuminated the manor, she felt a thrilling certainty. She could play this game and win on her terms. The shadows of Blackwood Manor were no longer just a test, they were her canvas. And Lila Monroe was ready to paint her own destiny. The morning light was filtered through the high, arched windows of Blackwood Manor, casting long, dramatic shadows across the polished marble floors. Lila moved quietly down the grand staircase, her slate-gray dress brushing the steps with almost ceremonial precision. Today, she would test the limits of Damien's control, and more importantly, gauge her own power within the manor. Damien was in the library, reviewing ledgers and contracts, his posture immaculate, a faint frown knitting his brow. Colton hovered near the doorway, sharp eyes fixed on Lila as she approached. She smiled softly, polite yet deliberate, masking the storm of strategy swirling in her mind. "Good morning," she said, her voice light, but with an undertone that made Damien pause mid-gesture. "I was hopping to review the new trade agreements myself. Perhaps you could guide me through them." Damien raised an eyebrow, intrigued and cautious. "You want to involve yourself in matters far beyond your years, bold but perhaps reckless." "Only if I am unprepared," Lila replied smoothly, flipping open her notebook, filled with observations, strategies, and careful notes from previous days. "And I like to be prepared." As Damien walked her through the documents, Lila noticed the tiniest details, the hesitations in his explanations, the subtle ways he emphasized certain clauses, the interactions he had with Colton through mere glances. Each gesture, each pause, was a thread she could follow, a key to understanding the man who wielded power so effortlessly. Later, she invited Damien to accompany her on a walk through the west wing of the manor. "I've noticed some unusual arrangements of furniture," she said casually, "and I wanted to better understand the flow of the house." Damien's eyes sharpened. Curiosity is commendable, but excessive curiosity can be dangerous. "That's why I brought you," she said with a measured smile, "to guide me safely." As they passed down dim corridors and sweeping hallways, Lila subtly tested boundaries. She lingered near certain locked doors, noted the subtle reactions in Damien's eyes. She asked questions that seemed innocent but nudged him to reveal small truths, protocols, habits, even moments of hesitation. Each answer, carefully tucked away in her mind, became ammunition for her growing strategy. That evening, Lila orchestrated a subtle encounter in the manor's dining hall. She intentionally mislaid a ledger, knowing Damien or Colton would notice. When Damien bent down to retrieve it, she said, softly but with precision, "Even the smallest oversight can shift outcomes. Perhaps the house itself tests us as much as we test each other." Damien paused, studying her closely. "Clever. You understand the nuances better than I anticipated." She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Observation, influence, control. She was learning the rules and bending them to her advantage step by step. Later, in the sanctuary of her private library, Lila mapped out her discoveries. The hidden staircase, the secret passages, Colton's loyalty patterns, and Damien's behavioral cues. Each entry refined her mental chessboard, preparing her for the next moves in the game that was her life. Before bed, she wrote with deliberate clarity in her notebook. Step 4, influence subtly. Test limits. Gauge reactions. Every smile, question, and hesitation is a move in my favor. As the manor settled into the quiet hum of night, Lila stood at her window, looking out at the mist curling over the estate's hedges. A thrill surged through her. She was no longer merely observing. She was beginning to shape the environment around her. Tonight, she had not only survived Blackwood Manor, she had begun to command it in ways Damien had yet to notice. And somewhere deep within, a fiery certainty whispered, "They promised wealth and power, but I will claim freedom and strategy." The game was no longer just survival. It was becoming hers. The dawn broke with a muted gray sky over Blackwood Manor, the sprawling estate shrouded in mist that clung to the stone walls like a secret waiting to be revealed. Lila stood in her bedroom, notebook open, tracing lines and connections she had observed over the past days. Damien's empire was intricate, vast, and far more dangerous than she had imagined. But within its complexities lay vulnerabilities, and Lila's mind worked tirelessly to locate them. Downstairs, the manor hummed with quiet activity. Servants moved efficiently, but Lila noticed patterns, which staff members hesitated before entering rooms, which one seemed overly attentive to Damien's moods, and who exchanged subtle glances in corners. Each observation was a thread she could pull. Information was power, and she intended to wield it with precision. When Damien arrived in the study, impeccably dressed as always, Lila greeted him with calm composure. "Morning," she said lightly. "I reviewed the company records. There are some inconsistencies I noticed, partnerships that seem advantageous on paper but risky in practice." Damien paused, studying her. "You've noticed?" Impressive. Few would see what is hidden beneath the surface. I've learned to read between the lines, Lila replied, her voice steady, confident. I think understanding the empire is the first step to protecting it, and understanding its vulnerabilities. His eyes narrowed slightly, a glint of both intrigue and caution. You think like a strategist already, but the house and the empire are more than the sum of their parts. They are a web. One wrong move and the threads pull tight. That afternoon, Lila set her plan into motion. She asked to accompany Colton to oversee a shipment of high-value assets arriving at the estate, a test she had devised to gauge the loyalty and competence of the staff. Along the way, she planted small, subtle distractions, observing reactions closely. A misplaced ledger, a delayed message, a questioned instruction. Each reaction revealed alliances, fears, and hidden agendas. By evening, she had compiled a detailed map of influence within the manor. Who could be trusted, who could be swayed, and who might pose a threat. But she didn't stop there. Lila requested a private dinner with Damien, under the guise of reviewing company strategy. As they sat across the candle-lit table, she casually suggested a theoretical scenario. What if an outside party wanted to destabilize the empire? Could we anticipate their moves? Could we outmaneuver them? Damien's eyes darkened. Interesting and dangerous, why ask? Curiosity, she said softly, and preparation. Knowledge shields us, yes. He leaned back, studying her carefully. You are bold, perhaps more bold than I intended. Lila smiled faintly, hiding the thrill that surged through her. Every word, every question, every subtle suggestion was a move in her game. She was no longer merely learning Damien's rules. She was bending them, testing limits, and positioning herself as a player of consequence. Later, in the privacy of her library, Lila pored over old ledgers, maps, and documents she had gathered during the day. She traced connections between Damien's allies, noting weaknesses, conflicts of interest, and opportunities to influence decisions before they were made. Every piece of information built a web of leverage she could pull when the time was right. Before retiring, she wrote in her notebook, Step 5, observe the web, identify threads, influence discreetly, position myself as indispensable without them realizing I am no longer a pawn. As night fell, Lila looked out over the mist-laden gardens. The estate had transformed in her eyes. From a fortress of power designed to contain her, it had become a playground for strategy, a canvas upon which she would draw her own influence. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The empire was vast, dangerous, and intoxicating, and now she was beginning to wield its power in subtle, undeniable ways. Somewhere deep within, a quiet certainty took hold. They promised wealth and power, but I will claim strategy and influence. And in that quiet, misty night, the real game had begun. Fog hung low over Blackwood Manor as Lila walked through the east wing, her slate-gray dress swaying softly with each step. Today, she no longer simply observed. She planned to act, to test how far she could influence the empire from within. The hidden spiral staircase she had discovered led to an old operations wing, once used for dispatches and confidential meetings. Dusty papers and forgotten ledgers hinted at strategies and plans long abandoned. But to Lila, they were a treasure trove. Damien appeared unexpectedly in the hallway, his presence commanding as always. You seem unusually confident today, he remarked, his dark eyes measuring her. I've learned, Lila said calmly, that observation is only valuable when paired with action. Knowledge without execution is wasted. He raised an eyebrow, impressed yet wary. Bold, but the house and those who run it are not so easily influenced. Her lips curved into a small, confident smile. I intend to try. By mid-morning, Lila convened her first subtle demonstration of authority. She had noticed that a shipment of sensitive documents had been left unguarded in a rarely used wing. She sent a discreet note through Colton, framing it as a safety concern. The documents should be moved to a secure vault immediately. Colton complied without question, and Lila observed his relief when Damien praised her foresight later. It was a small move, but in the grand game, small moves built influence. Later, Lila invited Damien to accompany her through the West Gardens, where carefully curated hedges formed a labyrinthine pattern. She began a casual conversation about alliances and loyalty among the staff, planting subtle suggestions about trust and competence. Her questions were innocuous but loaded with implications, nudging Damien to reconsider how he viewed certain individuals. "You are learning to play the web," Damien said quietly, a hint of admiration breaking through his usual reserve. "But be careful. Threads can snap if pulled too hard." "I understand," Lila replied evenly, her mind already calculating the next moves. "But sometimes the threads must be tested to reveal the structure beneath." As evening fell, Lila orchestrated a more daring maneuver. During dinner, she strategically complimented a lower-ranking staff member whose loyalty had seemed questionable. Her praise prompted the individual to take initiative in ways that subtly benefited Lila's plans, without Damien noticing the underlying influence. The play was delicate, and Lila thrived on the thrill of invisible control. After the manor quieted for the night, Lila retired to her hidden study. Candlelight flickered across the leather-bound journals she had collected, the spiral staircase leading to her secret wing. She meticulously documented the day's events, noting patterns of obedience, hesitation, and subtle fear. Every interaction, every reaction, was a move on her chessboard. Step 6. Test boundaries openly. Influence decisions subtly. Gain allies without revealing intent. Every action builds authority. Looking out at the mist-shrouded estate, Lila felt a surge of power. The mansion no longer felt like a prison. Each corridor, each shadow, each glance from Damien was now part of her domain, a landscape she was learning to navigate with precision and grace. Somewhere deep within, a resolute voice whispered, "They promised wealth and power, but I will claim influence, loyalty, and control." And as the night settled over Blackwood Manor, Lila Monroe realized the game was no longer just survival. It was her empire to shape. The moon hung low over Blackwood Manor, casting a pale silver glow over the sprawling estate. Lila lingered in the hidden spiral staircase, notebook in hand, tracing the paths she had mapped over the past week. The empire Damien controlled was vast, but beneath its polished surface lay secrets no one dared speak aloud. That evening, Lila's quiet exploration led her to an old, dust-laden study in the manor's forgotten wing. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air smelled faintly of aged paper and secrets. She pulled open a drawer and discovered letters, contracts, and photographs hinting at Damien's past dealings. Alliances formed through coercion, betrayals concealed by charm, and decisions that had left lives shattered. Her pulse quickened. Knowledge was a weapon, and now she wielded one sharp enough to cut through the layers of Damien's carefully curated image. The next morning, Lila invited a few key staff members for tea in the East Wing garden, presenting herself as approachable, inquisitive, and concerned about the well-being of the estate. One by one, she listened, observed, and subtly questioned, gathering information about Damien's habits, vulnerabilities, and whispered rumors. By afternoon, she began planting subtle seeds of influence. A worried but loyal servant received advice from Lila on handling minor conflicts, advice that quietly positioned her as a mentor figure. Another staff member, previously hesitant to speak, found courage in Lila's calm demeanor to raise a minor issue that revealed Damien's blind spots. Every reaction was a thread Lila could pull. That evening, during a private strategy dinner with Damien, she probed carefully. "Some past partnerships, they seem unstable," she said, sliding a delicate photograph across the table. "Do you ever wonder which of your allies might turn against you if pushed?" Damien's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "You tread on dangerous ground, Lila. Knowledge without restraint can be lethal." "I understand," she said softly, her tone steady. "But restraint doesn't prevent observation, and observation is how we survive." A flicker of something passed over Damien's face. Admiration, surprise, perhaps a hint of wariness. He knew she was no longer a naive observer. She had begun to challenge the hierarchy subtly, without overt confrontation, weaving herself into the fabric of the empire with precision. Later that night, Lila returned to her hidden study, candlelight dancing across the leather-bound journals. She compiled notes from the day, staff loyalties, Damien's blind spots, past betrayals, and opportunities to leverage influence without exposure. Every discovery added another layer to her strategy, a growing network of unseen power. Step 7. Gather secrets. Understand weaknesses. Influence loyalties. Begin challenging authority subtly but decisively. As she traced her fingers across the photographs, letters, and ledgers, she felt a thrilling surge of clarity. Blackwood Manor was no longer merely a cage or a test. It was a battlefield where minds, loyalties, and strategy ruled. And for the first time, Lila felt truly empowered. Somewhere deep in her heart, a voice whispered with certainty, "They promised wealth and power, but I will claim knowledge, influence, and authority." And under the shadowed corridors of Blackwood Manor, the young bride was no longer a pawn, she was becoming a force to be reckoned with. The morning mist had barely lifted from the sprawling lawns of Blackwood Manor when Lila emerged from her chambers, notebook tucked under her arm. The manor, with all its grandeur and hidden corridors, had become a chessboard, and today she would make a decisive move. Her plan was subtle but daring, to test Damien's response to her influence while strengthening her hold over the staff. Over the past weeks, she had carefully mapped loyalties, observed weaknesses, and collected secrets. Today, she would turn knowledge into power. In the East Wing, Lila convened a small meeting with the senior staff, framing it as an initiative to streamline estate operations. She spoke with quiet authority, offering insight into workflow inefficiencies and suggesting changes that would protect the manor's assets. The staff, accustomed to Damien's strict control, were initially hesitant, but Lila's calm, assured presence inspired confidence. One by one, they agreed to her recommendations, implementing her subtle directives without questioning their origin. Her influence was growing, silent, effective, undeniable. Meanwhile, Damien observed from the shadows, intrigued but cautious. Lila had not approached him directly, yet her maneuver had forced him to recognize her impact. He knew she was testing boundaries, yet she had done it without confrontation, without challenge, a dangerous skill in someone so young. Later, during a private meeting in Damien's study, she presented a carefully framed problem to him. "There's been a discrepancy in the recent trade reports," she said, sliding a ledger across the polished desk. "I believe it could compromise our standing if not addressed promptly. Perhaps an external review is warranted." Damien leaned forward, examining the ledger. The discrepancy was minor but had the potential for serious consequences if ignored. He looked at Lila, eyes narrowing. "You've orchestrated this?" he asked, tone low, a mix of suspicion and grudging respect. "Merely highlighting what might have been overlooked," Lila replied evenly. "I thought it important you saw it before any real damage occurred." A long silence followed. Damien's expression softened slightly, though his gaze remained sharp. He realized she was no longer a passive observer. She had become a guardian of the empire, a strategist and an indispensable ally. That evening, Lila documented every reaction, every subtle cue from staff and Damien alike. She noted the staff's increased respect, Damien's cautious approval, and the shifts in loyalty and perception that her move had triggered. Her chessboard was alive, each piece moving under her direction. Step 8: execute bold moves. Influence without confrontation. Make myself indispensable. Let the empire see my value and my power. As night fell, Lila stood on the balcony, gazing at the mist-laden gardens. The manor, once an imposing cage, now felt like a stage she controlled. Every shadow, every secret passage, every whispered word was part of her design. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet thrill surged through her. "They promised wealth and power, but I will claim strategy, influence, and authority. This empire will bend to reason, and to me." And beneath the silver glow of the moon, the young bride had become a force no one, not even Damien, could ignore. The first rays of dawn pierced the towering windows of Blackwood Manor, casting long golden beams across the marble floors. Lila stood at the heart of the mansion, notebook in hand, every secret she had gathered over weeks now a map of power. Today, she would no longer test boundaries. She would seize them. Damien entered the grand hall, his usual calm and commanding presence slightly offset by curiosity and a hint of wariness. He had watched Lila maneuver through the house, the staff, and even his empire. Now, the final move had come. "You've grown bold," he said, dark eyes scanning her. "Perhaps too bold." "I've grown wise," Lila replied evenly, stepping closer. "I've seen the threads of loyalty, the cracks in control, and the truth you hoped remained hidden." She slid a stack of documents across the polished table, contracts, letters and photographs revealing betrayals, manipulations, and alliances Damien had assumed no one would ever uncover. Her calm composure made each revelation hit harder. This empire you promised to protect, it's been shaped by fear, not respect, but respect, loyalty, and true influence. Her eyes met his steadily. Are earned, not demanded. Damien's jaw tightened. For the first time, the mask of effortless control faltered. He realized she was no longer the naive teen bride he had underestimated. She was a force he could neither ignore nor control. Across the manor, the staff watched quietly, subtly aligned with Lila. Her careful nurturing of allies had paid off. She was no longer an observer. She was the strategist, the leader, the pivot of power. I'm giving you a choice, she continued. Adapt or step aside. Your wealth and power were promised to me, but control, influence, and loyalty, those I claim for myself and for those who stand with me. Damien paused, evaluating, then slowly nodded, respect mingling with surprise. He had met his match, and the empire's true queen had revealed herself. That evening, as Lila walked through the now calm halls of Blackwood Manor, she allowed herself a rare, small smile. The empire was hers, not because it had been promised, but because she had earned it with intelligence, patience, and courage. Step 9: claim destiny. Lead with strategy. Earn loyalty. Transform promise into power. She stepped onto the balcony, the moonlight reflecting off her determined face, and spoke softly, almost to herself. They promised wealth and power, but I claimed freedom, influence, and the empire itself. And as the winds whispered through the manor, a voice from beyond seemed to echo her triumph. This is just the beginning. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, for every empire has its next story. The camera of imagination pans out over Blackwood Manor, mist curling over the gardens, lights flickering in the windows, and the young queen standing tall, resilient, powerful, unstoppable. Lila Monroe had not only survived the House of Secrets, she had conquered it.